In today's market, prompt engineering is the buzzword. But at its core, it's basically whatever the input prompt you have, then reiterating over it just to get better and higher quality outputs. Hello everyone, this is Wingo Kid. Today we'll focus on prompt engineering techniques. If you remember our last video, we talked there about prompt evaluation framework. What exactly it does? It basically quantifies how effective your prompt is. Now, building on to that, what we will do in this video, we will focus on prompt engineering. We'll have a basic example, then we will reiterate our prompt through different techniques like how exactly we have to be clear, specific, how to format the output, how to structure XML tags, and we'll give some of the different examples within a prompt to improve the score and have a final output. Before directly going into an example, first understand with this simple flowchart how exactly we'll implement different prompt engineering techniques. So for a specific goal, we'll have our initial prompt. Then that prompt will run through an evaluation pipeline. So what exactly we'll get out here? We'll get a score like how effective your prompt is. Let's say out of 10 you got a score of a 2. Then we'll improve our prompt based upon the techniques that we'll be discussing. After each improvement, what we will do, we'll run the eval pipeline again. So the initial output, let's say we got a score of a 2, now we'll get a score of a 3. That way, we'll implement different prompt engineering techniques to improve the evaluation score, and that will be repeated unless you are satisfied with whatever the input prompt you have or optimized by the model. It's finally time to understand prompt engineering with the help of real world example. On the right hand side, you can see what we are tackling about. So, in the form of ideal output, we want a diet plan. And to generate that diet plan, whatever the inputs we are taking from an user, those are height, weight, whatever the goal for that diet plan, and then any restrictions if applicable. So with the help of those simple inputs, we'll be providing some of the prompt, and in the end, we need a diet plan for a specific day which will cover your calorie consumption as well as how much amount of protein, fat or carbohydrates you need to be consumed. Now we'll go step by step there. So whatever the first prompt we will have, we won't get the ideal output in the first instant. For that specific input, we'll get some of the test scores. Now let's start with actual building. So what you can see out here, we have given a simple prompt. What should be diet plan for the person with whatever the height, weight, goal or dietary restrictions that the person will be inputting. So if you can see, that's the simple prompt currently we have. We'll be iterating this prompt and whatever the examples we'll be providing as in we go further in the course. Now, instead of directly going and checking how exactly our prompt has performed, let's first understand the code. So in the first line, we are importing the required libraries. In the second line, we are created the client environment with the help of Cloud's IQ 4.5 model. We have some of the helper functions like user message, assistant message, created a chat function. If you wanted to understand this in a little bit detailed manner, you can revisit our first video about how to build a basic AI chatbot. Now, the next 3-4 lines of a code are basically for an prompt evaluation pipeline. So in this line, we are creating a report that will give us HTML file about whatever the prompt evaluation, final grading criteria, what the scores and everything into an HTML format. Then we have created a prompt evaluator class out here. So that class will actually run the prompt evaluation framework, will run your prompt, will grade how effective your prompt is. Only point that you have to remember for here is about the concurrent task. Why we have set up at one? Basically, what these tasks are doing, if you remember model to model grading in prompt evaluator, so this one means at a time one API will get an access for evaluating a model. If we set up at a higher level, that means those number of APIs will be interacting for model to model grading. That will help you to speed up the prompt evaluation process. Then coming back to the model evaluator. So what the task we are describing to an agent, whatever we are building. So basically we want to write a compact, concise 1 day meal plan for an athlete. Then at the part of input, we are providing height, weight, goal, and whatever the restrictions are out there. And then whatever the test data sets that will be created based upon whatever the evaluation criteria is what we have set up, then the prompt that we have initially set up, we will run it through the test use cases whatever generated from this datasets file, and then we will see how exactly our prompt has performed. So after running our initial line of a code, we'll come to an dataset generation line of a code where once we run this code, a dataset will be generated within the file that we are working on. So what exactly the dataset is? The dataset is a JSON files where you will have an test use cases. If you remember, for an use cases, we have asked for a three test use cases. So in the dataset, you will have a three different use cases. Like let's say here we have a different heights and weight for three cases. Then within each case, the goal is different. Like here, this is something generating meal plan for marathon training. Then this is for muscle recovery. Then it's like an early morning swim recovery. So what we have done out here with the help of that dataset, now we have a different test use cases that we will be applying on whatever the prompt we are taking into care. So the initially what we are thinking, we are just asking what should this person eat. Then the inputs what you can see, the functions what we have created, height, weight, goal and dietary restrictions, those will be taken care from this dataset whatever we have generated for a test use cases. Then on those we'll run an evaluator. What exactly we are doing out here? We are basically grading how effective our this first prompt is. So after running everything on those test use cases, we got an average score of a 3. Along with that, if you notice, one output HTML file is also generated there. So let's see how exactly that output looks like. So this is how your prompt evaluation report will look like. It will cover the scenarios, the three different use cases that we are tackling on. Then it will give you a score for an individual case. If you remember, we will have an reasoning based upon whatever the additional criteria what we had in the code. And then the finally average score will be 3 out of 10. So the goal out here, if you see on the right hand side, we are using some of the prompt engineering techniques. Now what the techniques will do, we'll go step by step. The goal is to improve these 3 out of 10 scores and go as closer to 10 as possible. So, starting with our first technique, that is being clear and direct with whatever the prompt you are inputting. Let's understand that from an example. So, what you can see out here, in the both cases, for clear as well as directed, you can see the inputs are in para. It's okay to give a para, but we need to be specific. We need to use a simple language, and whatever the input that you are giving, see in the direct format, it needs to be start with an action verb so that task will be completed as fast as possible with the efficiency what we are requiring. Let's implement clear and direct prompting techniques to our prompt. What we had initially, what should this person eat? Now, what we have done, we have updated that prompt to generate a one-day meal plan for an athlete that meets the dietary restrictions. So what we have done out here, we have started with an action verb, have a simple language and made it clear. After running this, you can clearly see our average score now is 7.66 out of 10 from an initial score of 3.0. That's a pretty improvement with a simple technique where we have just made our prompt clear and direct. Even though we have improved our prompting score significantly, let's focus on our second technique, that is being specific. So what we are doing out here, on the left hand side, you can see a simple prompt, but on the right hand side, to make it better, we have added the guidelines. So what guidelines will do? Guideline will help the model, instead of boiling the ocean, it will specifically look into the output that is intended. So you are making a path clear instead of having a multi-pathway for a specific model. Coming back to our model, let's see how exactly providing a guidelines will help us to improve the score, or it will derail what exactly the prompting effective score we have initially. So what we have done here, we have kept the prompt same. Just like within the prompt, we have updated the guidelines in which the model should look for an outlook. Now after running this and after running the evaluation scores, finally we are getting an average score as a 7. So what you can see out here, whatever the initial prompt we had, that gave us an updated score around 3. Then by just being simple and clear, we have updated score to 7.67. And now by providing a guideline, score is going back to a 7. So that's basically we are over engineering the prompt. But it's better to understand what exactly being a specific means for providing a guidelines. Now, coming back to our third technique, that is providing structure with the help of XML tag. So, how this will be useful? Imagine a scenario where you have a long prompting instructions where different kind of workflows are already inputted. So, what you can see in this example, here we have two workflows. First, we are providing a code. Then we have created a database or a data source files, let's say API documents or anything from where you have to refer. So, there are two workflows out here. How we can provide a structure with the help of these kind of XML tags. So you can see here we are using two tags. First one is about my coding and next one is about documents. So that will help your model to understand different type of workflows, provide a structure, and reduce your time to response. Coming back to the example that we are working on, this is how we have updated the XML tag. What we have done out here, we have separated the athlete information from a prompt task and a guidelines just to make a clear way of our chatbot where exactly the athlete information lies. Now, after running these prompts, we are getting an average score of 6.33. So, if we compare with our updates, the first initial prompt score was 3, now we are at 6.33. So it's an update, but if we compare to an first and second update, the score is down because we have a very simple workflow out here, and the structuring of XML tag will help when you have a long list of instructions within a prompt. Now, coming back to our last prompting technique, that is providing example. Please note, either we can provide a single example to set a pattern, that is known as a one-shot prompting, or we can provide multiple examples that will help to set a pattern as well as provide inputs for a border case scenarios to a model, that is known as multi-shot prompting. And also note, if you can see on the right hand side, we have provided an examples and also used XML tags to break the workflows as well. So this is basically a mix of providing XML tags as well as providing examples so that model will understand better what exactly the prompting is. Coming back to our last and final update to a prompt, that is providing an example. See how exactly we have done that. So we have used an XML tag within an example to provide sample inputs as well as the ideal output. So that way the prompt and a model knows how exactly the input and ideal output should look like. Let's run this, and after running the evaluation pipeline we are getting a score of 8.33. So if you can see, based upon our initial 3 update, score has been improved from 3 to 8.33. Basically, what we have done out here, in the first input or first update, we made a prompt clear and direct. In second, we have provided some of the guidelines so that model will cut the noise. Then we provided some of the XML tags, basically to break down the workflow. And finally, we have added an example along with an XML tags for a model to know about how an output should look like. So starting with a simple prompt, what should this person eat, and then giving the inputs and outputs, what we have done, you can clearly see we have started with an action verb, then given inputs, given guidelines and example. So after doing all these iterations with the help of prompting techniques, our score has been improved from 3 to 8.33. Finally, to summarize all the workflows that we learned during the video, we started with an sample input with ideal output in the mind so that we have updated whatever the prompts we have as per the prompt engineering techniques what we discussed. So what we have done, starting from first engineering technique, we applied over the initial prompt and run the 3 test use cases. So the point here to be noted, after applying each technique, we got a different scores. But if we go one level deeper at a test use cases, you can clearly see at the last you have all the test cases where the score is greater than 8. But in between you have some of the scores for a specific test case around 4 5 that you can say less than 5. That's why if you see for a first prompt engineering technique having clear and direct output, we got an higher score from an initial prompt. Then scores went down. But for those specific use cases within those, let's say those kind of a scenarios where if you don't implement the prompt engineering techniques, then your output will not be exactly what you intended as an ideal output what we are showing on the right hand side. That's why it's important to update or iterate your initial prompt, then use the prompt evaluation frameworks to test out across various test case scenario to get best out of whatever the prompt you are providing to your chatbot or let's say any model to query by the user.